our speaker for today, Frank Meszaros.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Don. Thank you for coming. Can you all hear me? Can you hear me okay? Excuse me a minute while I put my uniform on. Okay. Before I go into the my own remembrances of World War II, the 3rd Division, I'd like to give you a little background on the 3rd. I know many of you know the 3rd Division, but let me just say the 3rd came into prominence first in World War I when they won the title of Rock of the Marne, and on their stationery to this day it's still used for their defensive stand against a superior force in France. In World War II, the 3rd was one of the first ones to bring the war to Hitler, being part of a large task force which invaded North Africa in November 1942. The 3rd did not see a lot of combat in Africa, but they did their part in bringing the Africa Corps to its demise. After that, the 3rd landed in first wave in Sicily. This was in the summer of 1943. Heavy fighting there. General Patton was the commanding officer of the American troops there. The British forces were there also. The campaign in Sicily was fierce, many casualties, but it was over very quickly. 38 days and it was over. The Germans were able to beat a strategic withdrawal, taking a lot of their men and materials with them to the Italian mainland. This was followed with the invasion at Salerno. The 3rd did not make that landing. It was the 36th Infantry Division, a Texas division, that made this landing, and they took a lot of casualties there. It was a very, very tough landing. The 3rd came in a little bit later, along with 2 other divisions, to form the 5th Army. General Mark Clark commanding. The 5th Army was made up of 4 divisions, the 3rd, the 34th, 36th, and 45th divisions. We did have attached units. The First Armored part of their group was there. We had a Polish division there. Of course, the English were there too with a full army. We had the Nisei joining us too, the Japanese regiment. Japanese American regiment, right? Sorry. And they formed a line, and I guess you can look at the map. I better get out of the way. Okay.
You have to shut the lights.
Can you see that? Can you see that? Anyway, I'm pointing at Salerno, where the original landings took place, and a line was formed across here. The British were on the right, the Americans and the attached units were across here. The English came up from the south to join up with the American forces that had landed at Salerno. And then there was a slow progress moving north through that's the rest of the summer into September, October, November. And then you see the line running across there. That was became known as the Gustav Line. The Germans stopped us cold there. The terrain down here is hilly. Once you get to Cassino, and it's not a resort, by the way, it is an abbey, a famous abbey, Benedictine Abbey. St. Benedict, I think, is buried there. If you ever see the dogs with the rum running around, this is where it started. We were stopped there because all roads lead to Rome, they say. The Krauts had all the roads covered, and they stopped us cold there. There was no advancing. And that stalemate lasted for a couple months. Somebody came up with the idea of an end run. Some say it was Winston Churchill. I don't know for sure. But anyway, what happened was that the Allies got together with the 3rd Division and the British 1st Division, made the initial landing, and there is Anzio. coming around from Naples up to here, and they made the invasion. You might be interested to know that they were unopposed. The Germans weren't there. They knew we were coming. You can't move 60,000 men around without attracting attention. But they had prepared fortifications further north, closer to Rome. If you look from Rome direct south to Anzio, that's 25 miles. When the Romans say we're going down the shore, they're going to Anzio. It's a resort area. Anzio and Nettuno, another small town there. The land behind it, you see, there's no mountains there. It's flat ground. It was good ground, except there was no irrigation there. So there wasn't much there. They moved, the Allies, 3rd Division, British 1st Division, moved in 7 miles and dug in. General Lucas was the American commander. He thought it prudent to hold up at the 7-mile mark, wait for reinforcements. Because moving further in, we may have exposed our flanks. And so he dug in there. The original beachhead was 7 miles deep, 10 miles wide. It changed during the course of battle, and that battle lasted for 4 months. Coming back now to what happened and why did this happen the way it did, we did not realize how fast the German High Command could react. Within a matter of 3 days, the German commander in Italy, and his name was Kesselring, Field Marshal Kesselring, a very fine commander. He had troops to pull on. He pulled some people from the casino front, moved them there quickly. 29th Panzer Grenadiers, a very fine German unit, was there. The Hermann Goering Division had been at Cassino, but they were stationed near Rome. He pulled the Hermann Goering Division, that's an SS division, excellent fighters. They had us, immediately the beachhead was surrounded. So now I'd like to come to my part of the story, which begins about here. I entered the Army in June 43, sent to Camp Wheeler, Georgia, large infantry training center. There they tested me and they sent me to communications school. I learned radio and message center operations in an infantry unit. Thanksgiving Day, I found myself on a pier in Norfolk, Virginia, boarding a troop ship with several thousand other men, boys, not men. We were all around 18 years old. What scared us most was that the troop ship, we were not in a convoy. Troop ship, period. That was it. No convoy, no naval escort, nothing. Of course, we were a little concerned about U-boats. Marines stationed on the boat said, don't worry about anything, there aren't any more U-boats. Well, thankfully, thankfully that was the case. We made a very swift landing at Casablanca, stayed there during the month of December, or most of it, doing some training. Things I remember Christmas Eve there. It was a sad time. We heard that Glenn Miller's airplane had been lost over the English Channel a few days before. Maybe you remember that. Anyway, about 2 days after Christmas, we boarded boxcars outside of Casablanca. These were the famous 40 and 8s. Those of you not familiar with that, you can put 40 men or 8 horses in a boxcar. You can imagine what kind of ride that was. We went over the northern mountains there in Africa, over to the Mediterranean side, stopping every few hours for obvious reasons. There was nothing there except wild goats. And we came out to the city of Oran on the Mediterranean. Another troop ship fast over to Naples. By this time, it was early January. Now, you remember the line was still there, and we were in Naples there, just outside of Naples. They put us on trucks and moved us up to a few miles below the front at Cassino, to a town called Caserta. You probably remember Caserta. We thought, well, this is it. We're going up to the front. Funny thing happened. They put us on trucks again. Instead of going north, we went south. Figure, what is going on here? We went back to Naples. Of course, we didn't know what was happening. Then on January the 22nd, we heard that some place called Anzio had been invaded. And 2 divisions were up there, and what happened was, of course, the boats that did that landing at Anzio came back to Naples. I was among the troops that were put on ships, along with the 45th Division, many other units there, 1st Armored. We were going to go back up to Naples, back up to Anzio. And as we approached the harbor there, this was about D-Day plus 5, about 5 days after the initial invasion. Maybe 6, I don't remember. We got about this far and we were attacked by a swarm of Messerschmitts, Me-109s, that attacked us, sprayed the area with machine guns. German pilots were excellent, and they did a lot of damage. We were still trying to get in, to try to land, get into the port. Well, finally, American fighters came over and drove them off, thankfully. Toward that evening, we were able to get off the boat, running. By that time, there were artillery duels going on at Anzio, incoming, outgoing shelling. We had to run very quickly through Anzio. Shells were coming in, artillery was going out. It was kind of a scary place. And they ran us inland about to a point maybe 3-4 miles behind the front lines. And there they divided us into groups. Now the 3rd Division is made up of, infantry divisions at that time were made up of 3 regiments. The 3rd Division had 3 regiments, the 7th, the 15th, 30th regiments. We were assigned to the 15th Infantry Regiment. And we waited another day at this kind of a barn place. And then we were, about 20 of us were going up to the front. At night, there was, of course, no lights. You could not have lights. The only light you could have was the flash of artillery. It's the only way you could see. As the artillery went off, you could see where you were stepping. And they got us up to a large barn area. And my name was called out. You stay here. The rest of the guys went on up to the line companies. I found out that 2 days before then, 3rd Battalion had been trying to set up a message center in a nearby barn. A shell came through the roof of the barn and killed 3, wounded 3, practically wiping out the message center soldiers. Of course, I had training in that. So that was my assignment. Daylight came, and there I was. It was a stone house, attached barn. There were a couple holes in the roof already, and we had just a few of us there that were headquarters company personnel, communications, message center, radio, that sort of thing. My job on Anzio was twofold. During the day, I acted as an observer in this house. A shell had come through the house and practically destroyed the stairs. So I sort of had to climb up to the 2nd story. There were 2 windows facing the front. We had binoculars, and our job was to see if there was any tank movements or anything. We pulled about a 2-hour shift. And then sleep when you could. There was no take a chance, sleep in the barn if you wanted to, but of course if it got hit, you were in trouble. There were some foxholes dug outside. You could sleep in those or whatever. Of course, there was no food, no hot food. I didn't have hot food for 4 months. We had sea rations, came in a can, delightful food, real repast, which we would have brought into us daily at night. My main job was to, there was one road leading up to the front. We were about 3/4 of a mile behind the front lines in this barn. I had to go up to the front starting around 11 o'clock every night. I had to carry the password. That was my job. The password changed every 24 hours, and you had better know the password because you get shot if you didn't. Melancholy Baby. I remember that was one of the passwords. Brooklyn Bridge. Any patrol coming in or moving among the units, they had to know the password. They'd be challenged. The guard would say the first word, you better answer with the second one. That was my job, to get that password to the company commanders at the front. We had 3 rifle companies. 2 were right at the front, 50 to 75 yards between the German lines and our lines. You could shoot a man with a rifle very easily at that distance. We also had 1 company in reserve a little bit back, and then we had a heavy weapons company, which was strategically placed mortars and machine guns. My job was to find the company commander and make sure he got the password. Of course, there were 4 company commanders, and I had to find them. They weren't always in the same place. Then I would have to find the first sergeant. Sometimes he was with the company commander, sometimes he wasn't. Where is he? How the hell do I know where he is? Go find him. And it's pitch dark. He had to give me what was called a morning report. This is what I had to carry back to battalion headquarters. The morning report was a sheet in which the first sergeant had to list his casualties for the previous day. Killed in action, wounded in action, missing in action, sick. And he had to list those names on there. Some days there weren't any names on it. Other days there were a lot of names on it. And it was kind of a bad thing to do. I had to carry that back to battalion headquarters, and from there went to regiment, from there to division. This way the division would know what their casualties were. So that's what I did. That was my job. There were situations there, people asked me, what was it like on Anzio? Well, it was dirty. I didn't have my clothes off for 4 months. Imagine what we looked like. No food, no clothes off, nothing like that. No kind of things like that. Up at the front, you could not show yourself during the day because the Germans had snipers who were excellent shots. So you were in a situation, you couldn't raise your hand and say, hey, stop the war, I have to go to the bathroom. Didn't happen. The guys at the front row, front lines had to use cans in their foxholes or their helmet if nothing else is available. Sorry to tell you this. Don says tell it like it was, and I'm telling you. So this was a bad situation, but that's the way life was. Fortunately for me, I was, 3/4 of a mile back. Not quite as bad. Anyway, this went on for 4 months. I remember one amusing incident, which I think you might find there were some funny moments there. I had come off guard duty, 2 of us at a time. We came into the barn. Most of the Italian civilians had been moved off Anzio for their own protection, but they weren't forced. So you better go or you're going to get killed. Our particular farm, the family had gone, but Pietro, the old Italian farmer, said, no, I'm staying. He wanted to keep up his property, or, he would hide in the foxhole all day. But anyway, this one day we came down. Pietro, at the beginning of the Anzio war, had owned 4 cows. 3 of them were laying out in the field dead, with their legs sticking up. They had been killed, shrapnel. He had 1 cow left. Cow was in the barn, and he was trying to feed the cow. Cow wasn't giving milk, and she was skittish. Poor animal was scared to death. When we came down off duty, and my partner decided he was going to shave. So he took his helmet off. He poured water into his helmet, cold water, of course. Had a tube of Barbasol, lathered himself up. The cow reaches over from the next stall and grabs the tube of Barbasol right into his mouth and starts chewing it. Well, of course, Pietro is screaming, "Morta, morta," his last cow is going to die. And, of course, Kelly, my partner, he's saying, oh, my God, I don't have any more shaving cream. He's waving he has his razor in his hand. So I walked over to the cow, and I started to pat her, and she's chewing away. All of a sudden, huge bubbles are coming out of her nose. So I don't know whatever happened. I think she survived. I don't know, but that was one funny incident that I remember on Anzio. On May the 22nd, which was just 4 months after the invasion, the word came that we were going to push for Rome. That dawn, there was a tremendous artillery barrage along the front. Um, not only our own artillery, but the Navy had ships out in the port area, firing right into the German lines. Our Air Corps was flying overhead, dropping bombs along the lines, machine gunning the Germans along. Figured nobody's going to survive this. So all of a sudden the word came, we're moving out. The line companies started to advance. They started to report opposition. The Germans had survived, and they were reporting casualties. Now, just 2 days before this, our communications officer had been wounded and had to be removed, and we had a replacement officer come in. He was just there 2 days. And on the day that we were doing the attack, he was with me on my right side, and we were sort of half crouching, half running, line companies up in front of us, and all of a sudden we ran into a mortar barrage. Artillery shells you can hear coming because they fly on a trajectory, but a mortar shell, all you hear is a rush of air, and it hits. Boom. Terrible weapon. And we ran into a mortar barrage, and I remember we hit the ground together. I had my weapon out in front of me like this, and I was holding onto my helmet to keep it from blowing off from the concussion. My right elbow was touching Lieutenant's left elbow, and all of a sudden the barrage lifted. It stopped. It became quiet. And I said, "Lieutenant, come on, let's go." And I looked, and there was a hole right through his helmet. I don't know whether it was a bullet or a piece of shrapnel, but he was killed instantly. He was with us 2 days. I often thought over the years, why am I here? And he's at Anzio Cemetery. But anyway, the drive continued. Later that day, we had a very bad incident happen. The 3rd Division had 995 casualties in 1 day, May the 22nd. I'm not saying they're all dead. These were dead and wounded. A lot of men. And that afternoon, it was apparent the Germans were pulling back. There was no firing coming, no artillery, nothing. It was quiet. They brought trucks up, and we were going to load onto trucks to chase after the Germans. I had just about started to climb, and I heard a roar overhead, and I looked up, and there were 4 planes coming right at us. Dropped bombs, machine guns. In about a minute, they had 124 casualties. 29 dead, the rest wounded. Bad part of it was they were American planes, P-51 Mustangs. Pilots made a mistake. They thought we were Germans. That's called friendly fire. So this is just one of the incidents that happened. It's just, what are you going to do? Out of those 995 casualties, 124 of them weren't necessary, but in war, strange things happen. We went on to take Rome. That was kind of a thrilling thing coming in. We came in the night of 4-5 June. D-Day was the next day in Normandy. Of course, we didn't know that. But the nice part of it was we were out of combat. The 34th Infantry Division was coming up behind us. They took up our positions and continued chasing the Germans north of Rome, and we were out of combat after 4 months. Can you imagine what we looked like? The 1st and 3rd Battalions were put into a wooded area just outside of Rome. They brought up portable showers, which was pretty great. First bath in 4 months. They told us to take all our clothes off. All we were left with was helmet, cartridge belt, and boots. Made huge piles of clothing. Guys in the motor pool came along with 5-gallon cans of gasoline, dumped it on, and just put a match to it. There's nothing more to be done with. So we got new uniforms, hot food, shower, and we were there. A couple nights later, B Company was stationed right down the road from us. One of them had trained with one of our message center fellows, and he says, "Why don't you come over tonight? We have some good Italian wine." Great. So that evening, after chow, we walked over to B Company area. 15 of us sitting around. Young fellow sitting next to me. I introduced myself. He says, "My name is Woody Murphy." At that time, Nobody knew who he was. I certainly didn't. We didn't know that he would go on to become the most decorated soldier in the U.S. Army in World War II. But then he was just another sergeant. Our sojourn in Rome was short, a week or so, and then they piled us on trucks and we went south. We went back to Napoli, or thereabouts. There's a little town just north of Naples called Pozzuoli. It's on the coast. And we were then told that we were going to train, amphibious training with the Navy. And that was our job every day, march down to the sea, get on a large troop ship, go out to sea, and practice coming down those cute little rope ladders into the Higgins boat. And I remember the first time I did that, I was terrified. I climbed over the rail, looked down, I had helmet, heavy pack, 9-pound rifle. The Higgins boat, about 3 stories down, looked like a postage stamp. And of course there were 2 sailors on the Higgins boat hanging on for dear life, trying to keep the ladder steady. On days that there was a rough sea, the boat would be rocking, the big boat, and the Higgins boat would be going like this, up and down, sometimes as much as 6 feet. And as you came down that ladder, you better let go right when the boat came up, or otherwise you'd break your ankles. So anyway, we did that for a couple months. I do remember after chow in the evening at Pozzuoli, the little Italian kids would come to the edge of the camp. They were starving, had no food, and we would give them whatever food we had left over, we would give it to the kids. And they were so grateful. They'd be standing there with little cans or whatever they could carry food in. Many years later, I saw an interview with a lady on TV, and a reporter asked her where she was from, and she said, well, I was born and raised in Pozzuoli. Well, my ears picked up. I realized that's where she was from. And she then said how kind the American soldiers had been to her and her family, giving them food. They had nothing to eat. That lady's name is Sophia Loren. That's her. It was her. She was 8 years old at the time. She was an 8-year-old girl. We continued that training until early August, about maybe the 11th, 12th of August, and then we broke camp, marched down to the ships again, but this time we weren't coming back. We boarded ships and we were told we were going to invade southern France. 15th Infantry was in the first wave. Of course, we knew what had happened at Normandy. We knew about that. Poor guys getting off the boats were shot as they got off the boats. The Germans were right on. There was buildings right at Normandy, right on the beach. It was hilly. They had good view. Trouble casualties. So this is what we thought. Good heavens, what's going to happen to us? So the morning of August the 15th, the Navy was shelling the beaches, far out to sea. We went down the Higgins boat again, made circles with the Higgins boat, then about 10 or 12 of them lined up, and we were the first wave. The sailors slammed us right up on the beach. I didn't even get my feet wet. And we moved inland, and lo and behold, southern France was a cakewalk compared to Normandy. Reason being, the beaches in southern France are long, slightly sloped. The Germans were at least a quarter to half a mile away. That's the only place they could dig in, where there was a row of trees. And we moved in quickly. We had more problems with mines than we did with small arms fire. I did have a friend who stepped on a mine. He lost his leg. He survived. I just saw him last year. But that was our big problem, was the minefields. But the Navy had fired into the no thanks, that's okay. The Navy had fired into the beaches and created shell holes. So as we advanced, we would hop from one shell hole to another to try to avoid the mines. And we moved in. The first day, we were 10 miles into France. It was very quickly. We took a lot of prisoners. And at this time, my life changed. The battalion S2 officer, that's intelligence and reconnaissance, very small section, about 8 men, found out that I speak German. And he had 3 German-speaking GIs with him. One of them got wounded. He said, we're taking so many prisoners, I have to have somebody. So I switched over from the communications platoon to intelligence and reconnaissance. And we would then interview, couldn't interview them all. We would just, if you get 100 prisoners, you'd interview 5 of them. Division MPs would come up and take them to the rear. But we would interview them as quickly as we could. It's best to interview a prisoner as soon as possible after he's captured. You can get the most information. He's the most vulnerable then. I would say, was ist deine Abteilung, which is roughly name, rank, and serial number. And I remember some of the Wehrmacht soldiers saying to me, ich sterbe nicht für Hitler. I'm not dying for Hitler. That was not true of the SS troops. They were tough. But anyway, that was part of the job. The other part of the job was going on patrol, which was kind of dangerous. But oddly enough, in France, there was no front line. It changed every hour. So we kept moving. Our patrols were in a Jeep. And we would take maybe 4 of us, one with a machine, Tommy gun, and I spoke German. We had a French-speaking one with us and the driver. And we would try to find out what the battalion objective was, try to find French civilians who were quite cooperative, ask them, were the Germans here? How many? Did they have tanks? Which way did they go? And we would scuttle back to battalion and report this information. And of course, we just kept moving. September, October, we just kept moving north. As we got closer to Germany, the fighting became stiffer. The Germans threw up roadblocks in France, but then they moved back. We just kept moving. Finally, we were into the Vosges Mountains in northeastern France, and we were in snow. All of a sudden, it was snowing, it was cold. You think of snow and mountains in Europe, you think of Switzerland. But the tallest mountain in Europe is Mont Blanc. That's in France. And we were on that sucker for a while. I remember walking along a frozen road counting the icicles on my helmet, just forming icicles forming. So it was very cold and very difficult fighting conditions at then. It was just before the Battle of the Bulge. We were into the country known as Alsace-Lorraine, which is a strip of land that runs between France and Germany. I've often thought the people that lived there must be schizophrenic because they never knew which they were. Are we French or are we German? Depends on the last 100 years who won the last war. But they spoke both languages, and the fighting there was rather fierce too. I remember in particular the Battle of Bulge started. We heard about that. We had our own problems because the Germans had thrown just about everything at us. We were in the Colmar Pocket, which some of you may. Our entire division received. Might go bad? Did that go bad? Is it okay? Okay. The Colmar Pocket, the entire division received a Presidential Unit Citation from President Roosevelt for what we did there. I remember, of course, because of the day, it was Christmas Eve again. I just remember Christmas Eve. The former Christmas Eve, I'd been in Africa. This one, we were in Alsace-Lorraine, and we were in a ditch, and there was going to be an attack the next morning, Christmas Day. Wars don't stop for holidays. We were laying in a ditch, snow, and the Germans had spotted our position, and they were firing a machine gun at us. If you see a machine gun at night, it shoots tracers. They're red. And I watched the tracers going over my head. Now, don't tell me the Germans don't have a sense of humor, because all of a sudden the tracers were red and green. Believe it or not. I thought, mackerel, they're sending us Christmas greetings. And they did. We were laying there dumbfounded, red, green, they're going over our heads. Anyway, the attack came off, and we continued on. Eventually, we got to Germany, the Siegfried Line, I remember marveling at the structures there, the dragon's teeth and so forth. We got into Germany itself. Battalion had certain objectives that we had to take regularly. And this one time, I remember one of the first German towns that we were supposed to take, not many miles past the Siegfried line. It was quiet. We had heard tank fire on our far left, far right, but this place there was nothing there. And the colonel sent 2 patrols out from the line companies to encircle the town, and they're reporting no opposition. Ain't nothing here. The colonel calls me over. He says, take your section and get into the middle of town. I said, what the heck? See if you can find any civilians. I said, okay. So 6 of us started out. 3 of us on the right side. I'm leading the one side and 3 on the other side. And we sort of moved our way into the town and didn't see anything. No Wehrmacht, no civilians, nothing. I got into the middle of the town and there was a Nazi banner strung across a building on the right. This building sitting by itself. And I sort of, I guess I did something foolish. I ran up to the building. I put my rifle up against the building, and being 19 and agile, I jumped up onto the first floor windowsill and reached up for the flag to pull it down. I had my left hand on it, and all of a sudden, it sounded like all hell broke loose. Wham, bang, 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 bullets hitting the building. I flinched. Some of the stones bounced off my helmet. I hit the ground, and I rolled around to the side of the building to get out of fire range. My squad opened up on what must have been several snipers, but they got no answer. They apparently fired and took off. Anyway, I'm not a souvenir collector. By the way, they told us, and I believe it, that if you were caught taking a prisoner, you had a German pistol on you, you'd be shot, no questions asked. So we didn't take any pistols or anything like that. But I did. Pardon me?
What was the name of that little town?
You know, I tried to remember it. I can't remember what it was. It was just past, may have been 5-10 miles past the Siegfried line.
Oh, you were in Luxembourg.
No, it wasn't Luxembourg. No, it was Germany proper. Yeah, it was down in the southern part, more toward, no, Aachen is in the north. No, this was in the middle, as we headed south.
What did the sign say? Did you know what the banner said?
Well, I have the banner. I can show it to you. You want to bring that up? I didn't collect anything else, but this is the only thing I collected. This is the banner. This is the actual one. This is it. Hold it up so they can see. Can you all see that? I pulled this down. This is the part I was on. I had my left hand here. My head was about here, and he missed me. These are bullet holes. He almost got me because my helmet was about here. And when I flinched, some of the stone came down on me. There's a couple other bullet holes in it. Anyway, you can fold that up, I guess. When the battalion jeep came up, I said, I got to keep this thing. So when I got home, I had it dry cleaned, and this is the first time I've ever shown it in public. I've never shown it then. This is it. Anyway, our advance continued. Our division was swung south into the southern part of Germany. We took some large towns, Augsburg, Kaiserslautern, Saarbrücken. The largest battle that I remember was at the Battle of Nuremberg, which lasted almost 4 days. Nuremberg was a heavy center for the Nazis there. They had a large stadium there called Zeppelinplatz, and they had all their parades there and so forth. And this is a fierce battle. This was in April 1945, about a month before the end of the war. We heard that President Roosevelt had died. Hitler would die soon thereafter, but not before he recruited kids. He ran out of manpower, and he recruited the 16 and 17-year-old kids, and they fought. Anyway, this one day in Nuremberg, we had a little command post set up at the airport, and one of the line companies brought in half a dozen prisoners, and they were all kids. Hitler Youth, what they call Hitler Jugend, yeah, Jugend. They were just kids, and I looked at them. One of them was very short, and I figured this kid's only 13 years old. So I walked up to him. I said, "Wie alt bist du? How old are you?" He said, 16. I said, "You're lying, little bastard," I thought. "You ain't 16. So I was smoking a cigarette at the time. I said, "Tust du rauchen?" Which is, "Do you smoke?" He said, "Yeah." I took a pack of Luckies out, and I gave him a Lucky Strike, and I lit it for him. He took one puff, so everybody in the room started laughing. He laughed too. He dropped the cigarette. One of his buddies says, "Kann ich das haben? Can I take the cigarette?" I said, "Yeah, go ahead." So anyway, this is the Nuremberg finally fell. Then we took Munich, which wasn't much fighting there. We took a lot of prisoners, but there wasn't much fighting at Munich. And by this time, the war was sort of cranking down. I remember Dachau, the concentration camp, is near Munich. We did not go in there. We were on patrol then. It was a dot on the map. I thought it was a town. I didn't know about concentration camp. Didn't even know it. Didn't know they existed. And Dachau was just a dot on the map. We went right by it. All I remember is a barbed wire fence. Didn't see anything else. Troops that came behind us, of course, did go in, and what they found there wasn't very nice. But we continued on south. By about May the 1st, we were at the Austrian border. I say we took the town of Salzburg, but there wasn't a shot fired. We just walked in, gone. Salzburg is where The Sound of Music was made, the movie. Beautiful town, the home of Mozart. We continued. We were about 50 miles into Austria when the word came, the war's over. It's all over. And well, I don't remember the name of the little town. That one I remember was called Radstadt. It was a very small town. Our battalion was depleted, but we still had about 600 men that had to be taken care of. All there was in a four-room schoolhouse. That was about it. So the Colonel O'Connell called me over and says, "Take a couple of guys and go down the road and see if you can find anything else for us to house some of these men. We're going to be living in pup tents here. Who knows how long we're going to be here." So I went down the road. We went about a mile past Radstadt. There was nothing there. It was just beautiful rolling hills. Birds were singing. Nothing. All of a sudden we started to hear singing. And I stopped and said, "Well, what is that?" It started to come closer and closer. I reckon it's a Wehrmachtlied, the German marching song. I said, "Oh my God, I hope these guys know the war's over." So they came up over the hill. They were Wehrmacht, and they were fully armed. They saw us, they stopped singing. The funny part of it was they were being led by a German colonel, and he was an SS colonel. He was dressed in black. He had on a white shirt. I hadn't seen a white shirt in 2 years. White shirt, black tie, had the Iron Cross right here. All it was missing was the monocle. And he was gray. Of course, to a 19-year-old, anybody gray is old. So he came, everybody stopped. He came marching right toward me. I came to attention, and I saluted him. He returned my salute. Excuse me. Anyway, he asked me how far is our headquarters. I told him, and he said we want to be under the jurisdiction of the Americans, not the Russians. So I directed him, and the Germans going by, they said, "Hello, Joe." Everybody was Joe. So that's the way the war ended for me. And I'd like to fast forward now to 50 years, fast forward. How much time we got? Got time left? We got time? Okay. Sure.
What happened to the young kid prisoners?
Yeah, they were prisoners. Yeah, they were prisoners. MPs came and got them, and hopefully they're still alive. So, they were just young kids.
What was your rank?
I was a corporal. Corporal. Pardon?
Only a corporal.
Corporal. Only a corporal. That's right. Yeah. Anyway, we did some occupation duty in Austria, and then they shipped us to southern Germany, more occupation duty, which was boring. And all I did was counting my points. When can I go home? So finally in November it came. And to Munich we went. More boxcars, only this time they looked like golden chariots. We rode the boxcars to Marseille, France. Good long ride. And there was another troop ship, and we went into, I never forget, December 1st, steaming into New York Harbor. All the whistles and what have you. Looking up at the Empire State Building was a big black hole in the Empire State Building. A couple of days before, there had been a fog in New York, and a plane had hit the building. And I saw that. But anyway, as I said, I'd like to fast forward now to 1994, 50 years later, when the celebrations were on in all over Europe for the Normandy and also the Rome, the fall of Rome. And I was fortunate to go with to go to Italy with about I guess about 60 of us from the 3rd Division. We went to Rome, but the ceremonies were at the cemetery in Anzio. If you ever can imagine what that's like to walk into the cemetery at Anzio, there are close to 9,000 American graves there. You walk in and you see all those crosses and stars of David. It's awe-inspiring. But anyway, we were in the cemetery for a while. The Italian government had set up a large tent just outside the cemetery. They had food and adult beverages for us. My wife and I lingered a little bit longer in the cemetery. I was looking for names. I didn't recognize any of them, but I was trying to find names. And I heard a commotion. I looked up, and there's President Clinton with a group of reporters and Secret Service men. They were walking along the road, so we just stopped and watched. One of the servicemen ran up ahead, and he took a flag off one of the graves and put it on the ground. Then the cameras rolled, and President Clinton came, and he picked the flag up and put it on the grave. I thought it was a little chintzy. But anyway, they left, and my wife and I walked outside, and there were 8 automobiles lined up outside the cemetery. One had the presidential seal on it, huge limo. And then smaller, 7 other cars turned out to be Secret Service cars. One man was there, he's a Secret Service guy, and I said, "Is that the president's limo?" He said, "Yeah, that's it." I said, "You mean to tell me they fly these things?" He said, "Yeah, wherever he goes, the limo goes." I said, "Holy mackerel." So the presidential car was there, this huge limo. He said, "You want to sit in it?" I said, "Great." So my wife and I, remember, we sat in there where Hillary and Bill were sitting. Boy, we just thought that was great. I was looking for the liquor cabinet, but there wasn't any. So, but we were sitting in the car, and then we got out, and we walked into the, started to walk toward the tent, and I was stopped. There's a lady standing there with a television crew, and she said, "Would you mind saying a few words?" I said, "Okay, all right with me." Her name was Andrea Mitchell. She's a reporter for NBC, and I did say a few words, and then we went on into the tent, and we ate some, and then the Secret Service man says, "The president is coming. He wants to shake everybody's hand." So President Clinton came in, and he went down the row. He said, had a few words just to say that he was very affable. He came to me. He says, "Where you from?" I said, "Bucks County, Pennsylvania." He says, "Uh-oh, Republican country." and he kept moving. So I thought that was kind of funny. So anyway, NBC did send me that tape of my interview on national TV, so I thought you might want to see that. So if we can crank that up,
Everybody turn the light switch on and
the back corner there.
Okay, all right on there.
Just focus a little on that.
That's not bad.
President Clinton paid tribute to the other, often overlooked American military offensive against the Nazis. 50 years ago tomorrow, the Allies took Rome, and the Italian campaign was ferocious. NBC's Andrea Mitchell is with the president tonight.
You see all right?
50 years after one of the war's bloodiest battles, Bill Clinton came to honor 7,862 Americans buried near Anzio Beach and all the valiant survivors of the Italian campaign.
Terrible situation here as far as feeling trapped. We had the Germans surrounding us on three sides with the sea at our back.
50 years ago, when freedom was in peril, this field ran with the blood of those who fought to save the world.
There were times when I was absolutely terrified. We knew we had a job to do. We were trained to do it. And I think all the guys in our outfit, they did it. They did what had to be done.
The spirit of common cause did not die here. A generation of Americans went back home to carry on their work. There was a platoon leader from Kansas, savagely wounded in combat.
For 4 long months, the Allies were pinned down at Anzio by German forces.
You sort of wondered, well, am I ever going to see the sunrise again? And fortunately, 50 years later, I'm able to stand here. And
we are the sons and daughters of the world they saved. Now our moment for common cause has come. It is up to us to ensure a world of peace and prosperity for yet another generation.
50 years ago tomorrow, Rome was liberated after battles that the president said provided crucial lessons for Normandy. At a final stop in Rome, the Clintons found time to explore the city's archaeological wonders.
Were the columns partly covered underground?
They had visited the Roman Forum once before, 7 years ago. Of course, back then, they could go sightseeing without an entourage of advance men, security, and photographers. The president came to Italy to make sure that the war here was not overlooked, as the Allies gathered this weekend to begin celebrating the anniversary of the Normandy invasion. Andrea Mitchell, NBC News with the president in Rome.
We'll have more on the D-Day preparations, including the reunion of some...
okay, that's it. Let's say if we have any, you got any time? If there's any time, any questions for anybody? Yes, sir.
When did you learn to speak German?
I learned to speak German as a child, really. My parents came from Austria after World War I, and they spoke German and Hungarian. Austria-Hungary was one country before World War I. So my mother spoke German.
Any other questions? Let me put them on here.
Okay.
You said you were not allowed to keep a German weapon.
Yes.
A Luger became my TO weapon because I had to carry a radio and I couldn't carry a carbine at the same time.
You're lucky you weren't captured.
Oh, I see, from the other side. Yeah, I guess I was.
Yeah. Yeah. Can't carry a German weapon, no. Had to be American. No, we never met the Russians. I started to say, I'm sorry, there was another question here. The Russians had taken Vienna on that last day when I met the German colonel, and they had taken Vienna, were moving in a westerly direction, but we never saw them. In fact, the last thing that German colonel said to me is, the truth to go, he said, "Die Russen kommen," the Russians are coming. but they never did. I never saw them. Yes, sir.
Meszaros, sir, I'd like to point out that there are 2 Alsace townships surrounding Reading, Pennsylvania here.
Oh, are there?
Presumably related to those in France.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. Okay. Any other questions?
When you came into southern France, where did you come in?
Saint-Tropez was the name of the town. Saint-Tropez, it was not far from the Riviera. I wish we could have been there. Okay. We landed in southern France at Saint-Tropez. Beautiful beaches.
You might want to know that the Japanese Americans were heading into Rome, and they were stopped by Mark Clark about 2 miles outside of Rome.
Is that right?
And Mark Clark's wanted the white troops to go through
Is that a
Rome
fact?
first.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's amazing. I remember going in. We went in at night, and there was no fighting. There was no shooting. I was in a Jeep, and we went past the Coliseum.
Captured
The
Germans.
moon was up, coming through the Coliseum.
Told them that
It's just
the
gorgeous.
Japanese had joined the Americans.
I can tell you.
I didn't know that.
We have, I know we have a good story here from Alan Okamoto, who spoke some time ago, and let him tell you a story about some fighting in Italy.
We got into Italy and started fighting, and the second day we were in battle, we captured a German lieutenant, and he was brought back, and he was amazed. He looked all around, he saw nothing but Japanese faces. So we asked our commanding officer, was ist los? And our commanding officer said, don't you know that Japan gave up and they're fighting on our side now?
Is there anybody that can top that one here? Another good story.
Okay.
No, you can't hear me? Well, I just said, can anybody top that one? I think that's a good story.
Okay, any others? Anything else?
I just want to tell you that I lived in the Netherlands yesterday.
So we can hear it.
Yes.
Yeah, when you were the devil to go, it's not only
It's not on. I don't know, something's going wrong. Sometimes it's on.
south of the Netherlands,
Oh,
on the German
south?
border.
Well, that was where the Battle of Bulge
Yeah,
was in there.
remember all the snow?
There,
Yeah.
let's say, yeah.
And the shelling.
Yeah. Anyway, I thought I did jot down some other things I forgot to tell you. You might be interested what the casualties were at Anzio. I wrote it down. Third Division, by the way, won 36 Congressional Medals of Honor, which is the highest number of Medals of Honor won by any division. At Anzio, the 3rd Division had 1,585 killed, 6,877 wounded, and 1,154 missing. It's a lot of casualties. Most of the missing turned out to be captured. They went out on patrol and just didn't make it. They were captured. Total losses on Anzio, and by the way, the German losses were, they reported 5,500 dead, 17,500 wounded, and 4,500 prisoners. Total casualties at Anzio were 56,700. That combines the British, American, and German casualties. So for a piece of real estate, roughly 10 by 7, to have that many people was a big price to pay. Winston Churchill was reported to have said that we thought we threw a snarling tiger onto the beachhead, and it turned out to be a beached whale. So because we were so quickly surrounded by Field Marshal Kesselring. But them's the facts. So okay, yes, ma'am.
You were in Italy. Wasn't the Italian army fighting?
Italy had surrendered sometime before then. They had simply surrendered, and I don't remember any Italian troops being there. Maybe there were, but I never saw anything. There were a lot of Italian troops captured in Africa. They were still active then in Africa.
they became co-belligerents.
We had some in the hospital.
Yes, we took care of some of them.
Oh, the Italian prisoners?
When,
This young lady was a nurse in Africa?
when Italy did give up,
Yeah.
they became co-belligerent, not allies.
Yes, co-belligerent. Yeah, okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Was it ever decided whether the commanding officer was prudent in holding or shooting
Well, he's talking about General Lucas, the American commander at Anzio, and he was criticized. In fact, he was relieved of his command. Whether he should have perhaps been a little bit more bold, but he always said, hey, I only had 2 divisions here, British 1st, American 3rd, that's all we had. If I'd have moved inland and further, our flanks were exposed. And we would have maybe got slaughtered. Well, the others say, no, you could have moved, if you moved more quickly, the Hermann Goering Division and the 29th Panzer Grenadiers wouldn't have been there in time to stop you. So he was criticized, but historians, you know, was he right or not right? I don't know. But by being prudent, he.
Where was Patton relative to all of this?
General Patton was the commander in Sicily. He had an incident in Sicily in which he slapped a soldier, and he was then removed from there. He was sent to England. In addition, he was preparing for the Normandy invasion. So General Mark Clark was the commander in Italy. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.